That janitor's got more love for that ball than our coach has for his own plays." Laughter echoed through the empty gym, bouncing off steel bleachers and polished wood. Grayson Ford didn't look up. His fingers moved gently over the worn leather of the basketball in his hands, cloth in one palm, a dab of cleaning oil in the other. Slow, circular motions, almost reverent. He'd heard worse. Across the court, a group of young players, fresh legs, cocky grins uniforms, still smelling of ambition, gathered near the bench, watching him like he was some relic that hadn't realized the museum had closed. "Yo, old man," one of them called. "You gonna kiss it goodnight too?" Another burst of laughter. Grayson let the moment pass. Then, one of the boys, the tallest, picked up a loose ball and spun it on his finger. "Tell you what, Ford, you sink a shot from half court right now. We'll mop the floor ourselves this week." The others hooted. Someone whistled. Even from where he stood near the sideline, Grayson could see the smirk growing on the kid's face, sharp, arrogant, like a boy who hadn't yet learned that gravity humbles all of us eventually. He set the ball back into the rack, wiped his hands on the towel slung from his belt, and turned to face them. "I mop the floor," he said quietly, "so you don't slip and blame someone else for falling. Come on, just one shot," the tall one pressed. "Or you afraid you'll pull something?" Grayson gave him a long look, eyes calm, unreadable. Then he turned back to his cart and began pushing it toward the exit. They'd learn. Life had a way of teaching those lessons louder than any coach ever could. Outside the gym, the late afternoon sun burned low over Denver's scrappy skyline. The lot was mostly empty, just a few rusted sedans and one familiar Jeep that always parked crooked. Clarissa Halton's. Grayson loaded the mop and supplies into the back of his truck, locking it down with the care of a man who didn't believe in shortcuts. As he climbed into the driver's seat, his phone buzzed. A text from Ruby. "Can we do grilled cheese tonight?" "Extra crispy." Grayson smiled, softened. "You got it, Peanut," he whispered to the dashboard. He drove home on instinct, letting the rhythm of the road lull him into that gentle quiet between memories. Not quite peace, just pause. Their apartment wasn't much. Second floor, 2 bedrooms, one shared heater that rattled in winter and groaned in summer. But it was safe, warm, full of drawings Ruby taped to the fridge and the faint smell of lemon detergent. "Dad," Ruby burst from the kitchen arms, flailing. "Guess what Mr. Larkin said about my essay?" Grayson tossed his keys into the bowl by the door. "Let me guess." "He finally realized you're the best writer in the entire 5th grade. Ruby beamed. "He said my story made him cry. Like real tears." Grayson knelt, pulled her into a hug. "That's my girl. Making grown men weep since 2014. Your sandwich is on the stove," she added. "I even flipped it halfway through like you taught me." Grayson stood ruffling her curls. "Extra crispy. Like you like it." He bit into it moments later and nodded with a reverence usually reserved for Sunday sermons. "You ever gonna tell me why you love that basketball so much?" Ruby asked, eyes watching him over the rim of her juice glass. Grayson paused, chewing slower now. "It's just a ball," he said eventually. "But it used to mean something." "Used to," he nodded. "Before I promised someone I'd stop letting it mean too much." Ruby tilted her head, unconvinced. "Did you break a promise?" Grayson looked at her. Really looked at the tiny frown forming on her forehead, the seriousness in her gaze that had nothing to do with 5th grade essays. "I kept the wrong one," he said softly. The next day at the gym, Clarissa Halton stood on the mezzanine-level clipboard in hand-sharp black suit, cutting clean lines across her silhouette. She wasn't watching the team. She was watching him. Grayson felt it even before he looked up. She descended the stairs with the quiet confidence of someone who knew how to command silence. "I have to ask," she said, not bothering with pretense, "why do you polish that ball like it's your own heart you're cleaning?" Grayson didn't flinch. "Because sometimes it feels like it is." She studied him, lips pursed, not quite judgmental, but close. "You ever coach?" she asked. He chuckled. "I've cleaned up after a few. You ever play long time ago? Were you any good?" He met her eyes. "Good enough to be hated." Clarissa's gaze flickered. Just for a moment. Something behind those amber eyes shifted curiosity, maybe, or recognition. "The team's a mess," she said bluntly. "No heart, no chemistry, no fight." "They're kids," he replied. "They still think the scoreboard tells them who they are. I'm thinking about bringing in a second coach. Strategy specialist." Grayson picked up the ball, held it out to her. "You think they'll listen to a janitor?" She didn't take the ball. "Just said I think they'll listen to someone who still hears the game in his blood." He let that hang there, then placed the ball gently back on the rack. "Let me know when you find that guy." He walked away. But Clarissa wasn't smiling anymore, and Grayson. He could feel something shift inside him, like a weight had tilted just enough to roll forward. The neon sign outside Danny's bar flickered between D and N, as if it couldn't make up its mind whether to stay open or shut down for good. Inside, the place smelled like old wood, cheaper whiskey, and the kind of regrets that didn't make it into country songs. The TV over the bar was muted, looping highlights from last night's game. No one paid attention except for the old coach nursing his second glass of something amber and unsweetened. Grayson pushed the door open and paused. He didn't come here often, maybe once every few months when Ruby had a sleepover and he couldn't stand the silence at home. But tonight was heavier than usual. Coach Halton spotted him immediately and raised his glass like a flag of surrender. The janitor walks into a bar. Sounds like the start of a sad joke. Grayson smirked, settling into the empty stool beside him. Depends on how it ends. They sat in companionable silence for a while. No small talk. Just the clink of ice and the occasional grunt from a local losing at darts. Halton finally spoke. "I watched you with that ball yesterday. Wasn't just cleaning. You were listening to it." Grayson took a slow sip of his beer. "Sometimes the old things still speak. We just forget how to hear." The coach grunted in approval, swirling the liquid in his glass. "You ever miss it?" Grayson didn't answer immediately. Instead, his eyes drifted toward the bar's far end where a small trash can sat between two bar stools, forgotten and underused. "I miss the quiet it used to give me," he said. "The silence between the crowd's roar. That split second when the ball leaves your fingers and you already know." Halton followed his gaze. "Prove it," he said, suddenly curious. "That shot you just described? Make it." Grayson turned his head. "You're kidding." Coach shrugged. 23 feet. Roughly same distance as the top of the key. Give or take. Grayson's eyes narrowed like a dog recognizing the whistle only he could hear. He picked up the empty beer can. Measured the arc. Flicked his wrist. Clink. Straight into the trash can. Silence. Then a slow, low whistle from behind the bar. Halton's expression sharpened. He picked up his own can, pretended to shoot, and missed by a mile. "Well, hell, looks like I pulled something just watching you." Grayson laughed once, short and deep. Halton leaned in, voice low. "You ever consider coming back to the game?" Grayson shook his head. "No. Why not? Because there's more ghosts on the court than players, and they all wear my number." The coach didn't flinch. "I'm not asking you to play. I'm asking you to teach." Grayson looked away. "I mop floors. That's all I'm good for now." "That's a lie," Halton said, quiet but firm. "And you know it." He reached into his jacket and slid a folded document across the bar. Grayson glanced down at the header. Assistant Coach, Wild Hawks Basketball Club. "I need someone who sees the game like it's breathing. Someone who can teach these kids that winning isn't always about the scoreboard." Grayson exhaled through his nose. "I'd need full control over tactics. No interference. Done. No publicity, no press. I don't do locker room speeches. Even better." Grayson hesitated. "And I don't play." Coach Halton raised a brow. "Say that again after your third beer." They both laughed. But only one of them meant it as a joke. Grayson signed. The next morning the gym was buzzing with drills and sneakers screeching against waxed floors. No one noticed when Grayson walked in, not at first. He didn't wear a coach's polo. No whistle. Just his usual janitor's uniform, minus the cleaning cart. Clarissa spotted him from the mezzanine. She raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Coach Halton gathered the team mid-court. "This is Grayson Ford. He's stepping in as assistant coach." Dead silence. One of the players, Dylan, the tallest and cockiest, snorted. "Wait him, the dude who wipes sweat off the floor." Halton's tone sharpened. "The same one who's forgotten more about this game than you'll ever learn." Another murmured, "This is a joke, right?" Grayson stepped forward. "You think it's a joke?" He didn't wait for an answer. He walked to the far sideline, past the arc, past the bench, stopping near the water cooler. Then he called ball. One of the assistant players hesitated, then tossed it. Grayson caught it. No spin. No bounce. He stared down the court. One of the players whispered, "That's half court." Grayson set his feet. One smooth motion. Release. Swish. The room went still. He didn't smile, just turned back toward the team and said, "Now, who wants to learn how to do that on command?" Clarissa found him later that evening alone in the locker room wiping down chalkboards. "You planned that shot," she said. "Nope." "Then why did you do it?" Grayson looked up, eyes steady. "Because kids only believe in what they can see. I just gave them something real." Clarissa crossed her arms, thoughtful. "My father believes in you. That means something. What about you I don't know yet?" Grayson gave a slow nod. "That's fair." She lingered a second longer than necessary, then added, "You're not what I expected." "I used to be," he said. "Then life happened. Now I'm something else. Not worse, just different." She opened her mouth as if to ask more, but thought better of it. Instead, she just said, "Welcome to the team." And for the first time in a long while, Grayson allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, he belonged there. The office smelled faintly of dry erase markers and liniment, the scent of seasons lost and futures gambled. Clarissa Halton stood behind the desk, arms crossed as Grayson studied the playbook he had scribbled on the whiteboard. "You really expect them to understand all this?" she asked, nodding toward the layers of overlapping arcs, X's and O's drawn with surgical precision. "They don't need to understand it yet," Grayson replied. "They just need to feel what it's like to move with purpose instead of panic." Clarissa tilted her head, skeptical. "And if they don't," Grayson didn't look up, "then they lose. But at least they'll know why." She watched him another second, then walked over, grabbed a red marker and circled one of the player routes. "You've got 2 running blindside screens at the same angle. That'll crowd the paint." Grayson paused, then smirked. "You watch more film than I thought." "I own the team," she said, "but I didn't inherit my father's blindness." He raised an eyebrow. "To the game, to second chances." There was silence for a beat. A quiet too full to be empty. That afternoon, Grayson stood alone at center court as the team trickled in, laughing, roughhousing, checking phones. None of them knew what was coming. He blew the whistle once. The sound cut the air like a razor. The gym fell silent. "You've all seen me clean floors," he said, pacing slowly. "But now I'm here to clean something else, bad habits." Some players exchanged glances. One rolled his eyes. Grayson turned. "Let's talk about why you lose. It's not talent. It's not height. It's not even effort." He pointed to his temple. "It's because you're always playing with your bodies and never with your minds." He picked up a ball and tossed it toward the glass, letting it bounce once, then caught it. "Basketball isn't chaos. It only looks that way to people who don't listen." He paused. "You listen to the sound of a bounce, you'll hear how high someone jumped. The rhythm of a dribble that tells you whether they're nervous or in control. The silence. That's where the real game lives." A hush settled over the gym, something unspoken but undeniable. From the back, Dylan. The tall, brash forward raised his voice. "All right, Coach Janitor. Then why don't you show us something we don't know?" Grayson tossed him the ball. "Check up." The challenge lit up the court like gasoline meeting fire. They cleared space. Dylan squared up. Half court shot again. "No," Grayson said. "Post move. 3 seconds. You get past me, you win. I stop you. You run sprints till your legs forget how to be cocky." Snickers. Dylan nodded. Game on. He drove left hard, shoulder down. Grayson slid with him grace in slow motion. Dylan spun, tried to fake right. Grayson anticipated it, shifted early and planted firm. Dylan went up. Grayson didn't swat the ball. He didn't need to. He stood his ground. Thud. The ball bounced off the side of the backboard and dropped flat. Silence. Grayson held up 3 fingers. 3 seconds. Dylan stared at him breathless. Not angry, just stunned. Grayson turned to the team. Anyone else? No one moved. Later that evening, Ruby sat at the kitchen table with a glue stick in one hand and glitter on her nose. She was making another collage this time, a drawing of Grayson holding a clipboard like a superhero cape was flowing behind him. "You know, she said I told my teacher today that my dad teaches basketball now." Grayson, chopping onions for dinner, smiled softly. "Yeah. What did she say?" She said, "Wasn't your dad a janitor?" And I told her, "He's both. He cleans messes wherever he goes." Grayson laughed, moved by the innocence in her voice, but also the truth. "I'm proud of you, Peanut." Ruby squinted. "Do coaches cry during games?" He turned away to wipe his hands. "Sometimes, but only when the scoreboard doesn't tell the whole story." That night, after Ruby went to bed, Grayson heard a knock at his door. He opened it to find Clarissa still in a blazer heels clicking against the apartment hallway. She held up a folder. "You signed this." Grayson furrowed his brow. The assistant coach contract. Clarissa opened it and pointed to a paragraph near the bottom. "Player eligibility waiver subject may be placed on active roster under emergency conditions if signed below." Grayson blinked. "Wait, what?" "You signed it," she said again, "and my father submitted it to the league yesterday. I said I wouldn't play." Clarissa looked at him, eyes calm but unmoving. "Then maybe you shouldn't sign things after beer number 3. He looked at her speechless, then broke into a low, reluctant laugh. "You two planned this." Clarissa shrugged. "We hoped? Doesn't mean you have to use it. Just means, if the court calls you have a choice." She turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "For what it's worth," she said, voice quieter, "there's not a day I walk into that arena without wondering who I would have been if someone like you had coached me when I was their age." Grayson's reply was almost a whisper. "Then maybe it's not too late." Clarissa's eyes softened, but she didn't say another word, just walked away. And for the first time in years, Grayson closed the door and didn't feel like a man locked inside his own past. The early morning light filtered through the high windows of the gym like truth through stained glass, soft, indirect, but impossible to ignore. Grayson stood alone at the free throw line, bouncing the ball in silence. Once, twice, again. The same rhythm he'd used 1,000 times in a former life. Only now it wasn't a routine. It was a prayer. You do that every morning. The voice came from behind him, cool, curious. "Clarissa Halton." Grayson didn't turn. "Only when I've got too much on my mind and not enough words to say it." She stepped down from the mezzanine heels, clicking faintly until they met wood. Today, she wasn't dressed for boardrooms. Jeans, sneakers, a worn leather jacket. She looked younger, or maybe just less armored. "I heard what happened with Dylan yesterday," she said, her tone unreadable. Grayson passed the ball to himself with a soft bounce off the backboard. "He's got potential, but ego's louder than instinct right now." Clarissa crossed her arms. "That's not just him. The whole team looks at you like you walked in through the wrong door." "I did," Grayson said simply, "and that's what makes it work." Clarissa studied him for a beat, then softened. "You've made them nervous. That's a good start." Grayson smiled, faint but real. She wandered toward the bleachers, sat on the 3rd row, and watched him for a while. No clipboard, no criticism, just presence. "You don't talk much about your past," she said finally. Grayson didn't look at her, just kept bouncing the ball in slow, steady rhythm. "That's 'cause the future doesn't always care what jersey you used to wear, but I do," she said. He caught the ball, held it still, then asked. Clarissa hesitated, not because she didn't want to, but because she wasn't sure which version of the truth she was ready for. "What happened to you, Grayson?" He let the ball drop. It rolled away slowly, bumping against the base of the bleachers like it too was tired of circling the same court. "I was good," he said, "real good. Not NBA star good, but good enough to scare guys who didn't like being challenged. Rick Marston. Grayson's eyes darkened. He didn't like that I didn't play politics, or that I drew plays better than he did, or maybe it was that the team started listening to me more than him, so he pushed you out. No, Grayson said. He waited for the moment I couldn't push back. Clarissa leaned forward. Tell me. He exhaled, slow, measured, like removing a bandage you know will tear skin. We were on the road. Late season. One of our best players, Jason, took a nasty fall in practice. Concussion protocol said sit him out, but Rick forced him to suit up anyway. I argued. Loudly. Too loudly. Clarissa stayed quiet. Grayson's voice dropped. Jason collapsed during the second quarter, never regained consciousness. 2 weeks later, his parents pulled life support. My God. I left the team the next day. Rick called it insubordination. I called it conscience. Clarissa's voice was barely a whisper. That's why you quit? Grayson nodded. And why I swore I'd never play again. Not if the game came at the cost of someone's life or soul. Clarissa stood, crossed the court slowly like her steps were carrying the weight of what she'd just heard. You didn't fail anyone, Grayson. He looked at her then. Really looked. Didn't I? She reached for the ball, held it out to him. You're here now, coaching kids who might never have made it without you. That's not failure. That's redemption. Their hands touched briefly around the ball. Not romantic. Not yet. But something charged the air, an understanding deeper than words. You're not who I thought you were, she said softly. Disappointed, she shook her head. Not even close. Later that afternoon, practice unfolded under Grayson's careful watch. Drills tightened. Ball movement sharpened. Players started running with intent instead of habit. Even Dylan began listening, nodding after a tough rebuke rather than rolling his eyes. Clarissa sat in the bleachers beside Ruby, who'd come to the gym straight from school with her backpack still half-zipped. He's different here, Clarissa said to the girl beside her. Ruby grinned. He's always been like this. You're just seeing it now. You really think he's meant for this? Ruby looked up with the kind of conviction only children can carry. My dad was born for this. He just forgot for a while. Clarissa smiled, then watched as Grayson crouched beside a younger player who'd missed every layup in a drill. He didn't yell. He didn't criticize. He just whispered something pointed once and stepped back. The boy scored the next shot. Clarissa's heart tugged. She turned to Ruby. Has anyone ever told you you're wise beyond your years? Dad says I got it from my mom. Clarissa hesitated. Can I ask what happened to her? Ruby nodded. Cancer. I was 5. She told Dad to promise he'd still smile even when she wasn't around. Clarissa swallowed the lump in her throat. Does he? Only when he's around people who don't expect him to? Clarissa didn't reply, but her eyes never left Grayson the rest of practice. That night, Grayson walked Clarissa to her car under the quiet glow of the parking lot lights. Thanks for not running, he said. Thanks for not hiding, she replied. He hesitated, then added, If you're still trying to decide what kind of man I am. She cut in, eyes locked on his. I already know. She got in her car, didn't start it immediately. Grayson turned to go, but her voice stopped him one last time. Grayson. He turned back. You're not just cleaning up a team here, she said. You're cleaning up the parts of this club that gave up when they shouldn't have. And then she drove away, leaving him standing there not broken, but slowly being rebuilt. The Wild Hawks locker room buzzed with post-practice energy, sweaty jerseys flung over benches, towels, snapping sneakers, squeaking against concrete. Grayson leaned over the strategy board, sketching plays in blue marker while the team filtered out in pairs, still joking and jostling like brothers in the making. He heard the voice before he saw the face. Well, well, if it isn't Grayson Ford mopping his way into strategy meetings now. Grayson froze. The marker in his hand stopped mid-arc. His jaw tensed not visibly, but enough that anyone watching closely would have seen it in the grip of his knuckles. Rick Marston. Same sharp smirk. Same stiff, expensive jacket that never quite fit right on his frame. same venom laced into every syllable he spoke. Grayson stood slowly. "Rick, still pretending you invented basketball?" Rick chuckled. "Still pretending you didn't throw away your shot?" The players who remained quieted, eyes darting between the two men. They could feel it like a barometric pressure drop before a storm. Grayson kept his voice calm. "What do you want?" Rick stepped forward. "I came to see what all the noise was about. Word around the league is the Janitor's got a clipboard now. Even Clarissa's backing you. That's new." "She backs people who earn it," Grayson said. Rick leaned in slightly. "She backs people who win." That landed. But Grayson didn't flinch. "She backs people who don't gamble with lives just to keep their job." Rick's face tightened, but only for a moment. "You still peddling that sob story? You still sleeping at night?" Rick's grin flickered. Then he turned to the players watching now, frozen in silence. "I'd be careful listening to this guy," Rick said. "He'll walk out on you the moment things get hard." Grayson stepped forward, voice dropping just enough to make every syllable weigh heavier. "No, Rick. I walked out when a young man's life became less important than your win column. And I'd do it again." Rick chuckled coldly. "Let me guess, you think you're the hero now." "I don't care what I am to you," Grayson replied. "But I care who I am to them." He nodded toward the players, kids still too stunned to process what had just unfolded, but wide-eyed enough to know they'd witnessed something real. Rick stared at him for a long second, then scoffed and walked out muttering, "This league eats idealists for breakfast." Later that evening, Grayson sat in the stands alone under the gym's humming lights, staring out at the court as if it were some kind of confessional. Clarissa arrived, quietly taking a seat beside him without a word. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then she said, "He came here to rattle you. He came here to remind me who I used to be." Clarissa looked at him sideways. "You mean the man who stood up for a teammate when no one else had the guts?" Grayson let out a slow breath. "I mean the man who never forgave himself for not doing it sooner." She placed a coffee cup on the bench between them. Steam curled into the space between silence and vulnerability. "I saw it happen," she said, voice low. "The game," Jason collapsed in. "I was there. My father brought me. I remember the crowd going dead silent. I remember you holding him until the medics came." Grayson looked down, swallowing hard. "He was like a brother to me." Clarissa nodded. "I know. And I also know you were the only one who didn't pretend it was just an accident." Grayson looked at her. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because the man I watched in that locker room today, the one who didn't back down from Rick, he's not broken. He's just rebuilding." He studied her face. "Why do you care?" Clarissa hesitated. "Because I've spent my whole life trying to fix this club, and I've seen more people pretend to care than actually show up. You showed up." A pause. Then she added softer, "And because Ruby's right. You don't smile around people who expect you to. Only around the ones who earn it." Grayson chuckled, caught off guard. "That kid gives away all my secrets." "She's your mirror," Clarissa said. "She sees the parts of you you try to hide." He nodded slowly. "She saved me, you know. After her mom died, I thought I'd never pick up a basketball again. But one night I came home and she had drawn a picture of me dunking with a cape on. She said, 'You're still my superhero even if you're sad.'" Clarissa blinked back something wet. "That's the thing about kids," she said. "They don't need you to be perfect. Just present." They sat in silence again, watching the empty court stretch before them like a canvas yet to be painted. Then Clarissa turned to him, smile soft but sincere. "So, about that contract loophole." Grayson groaned, laughing under his breath. "You're not going to let that go, are you? I'm just saying, if there ever comes a moment where we need you on that court, I want you to remember what you told Rick today." He met her eyes. "Which part?" "The part where you said, 'I care who I am to them.'" Grayson nodded slowly, deliberately. "I meant that. I know," she whispered. "That's why you're the only one I trust." Then she stood, her footsteps light as she walked toward the exit. Before she disappeared, she turned back once more. "And Grayson," she called. "Yeah, If you ever do end up playing again, don't play for revenge." He raised an eyebrow. "Then, what should I play for?" Clarissa's voice was almost a whisper now. "Play like someone's watching, who still believes you can fly." And then she was gone, leaving behind a silence filled not with regret, but with possibility. The Wild Hawks had never been the kind of team anyone feared. No reporters, no sold-out bleachers, just cracked vinyl seats, hand-me-down uniforms, and a roster full of kids who'd been passed over, told no, and expected to lose. But now, something was shifting. It started with movement. Not fast, not flashy, just intentional. Passes that made sense, screens that stuck, communication whispered under breath but clear as gospel to those who understood the rhythm. And at the center of it all, Grayson Ford. Clipboard in one hand, silence in the other. Watching, listening, reading the floor like a map he had memorized long ago. During one scrimmage, he stopped play mid-drill. "Dylan," he called. "Why didn't you switch on the baseline cut?" The tall forward shrugged. "I thought Cameron had it." Grayson walked to mid-court, placed the ball down. "You thought he said, or you hoped?" Dylan frowned. "What's the difference?" Grayson stared at him. "Hope is a feeling. Thought is a decision. On this court, if you're not thinking, you're just reacting. And reaction is how you lose to someone who plans better." He picked the ball up and tossed it gently to Dylan. "You've got talent. But if talent doesn't trust the plan, it becomes chaos in a jersey." That landed. Dylan nodded once. "Got it, coach." Grayson smirked. "Good. Now run it again, and this time decide." That weekend, the Hawks faced the Fremont Bulls, taller, faster, with jerseys that actually matched, and a bus that didn't smell like it ran on expired coffee. From the opening tip, it was clear the Hawks were outmatched physically. But mentally, that was another story. Clarissa sat in the front row, flanked by Halton on one side and Ruby, her honorary assistant statistician, on the other. Grayson crouched near the sideline, voice calm but sharp. "Pull the defense, run, shadow cross, let them overcommit." The play unfolded like choreography. 2 decoy drives, a fake slip. Cameron drifted to the corner, wide open. Swish. The crowd gasped. Clarissa leaned over to Ruby. "Was that the same kid who airballed twice last month?" Ruby beamed. "Coach says fear disappears when you give it a job to do." Clarissa blinked. "That's surprisingly poetic." Ruby nodded proudly. "He says lots of stuff like that. He just pretends it's not wise." By halftime, the Hawks trailed by only 2. The Bulls looked rattled, like they had expected a warm-up game but got a chess match instead. In the locker room, Grayson drew on the whiteboard while the players drank water, wiped sweat, listened like soldiers before the final push. "They're panicking," he said. "You see it in their transitions. Too quick, too early. They're trying to outrun their own nerves." Dylan raised a brow. "So, what do we do?" Grayson capped the marker. Turned. "We slow it down, make them feel every second. You control the clock, you control the pulse." Cameron laughed under his breath. "You make this sound like a war movie." Grayson smiled. "That's because this isn't just a game, it's a message." He scanned the room. "To every school that looked past you, every coach that said you weren't enough, every scout who never returned your call, tonight we tell them they were wrong." Halton, leaning near the door, whispered to Clarissa, "That boy was born to lead." Clarissa nodded slowly. No, he was forged. The Hawks won. By 5. No buzzer beater, no miracle. Just grit, precision, and the quiet, relentless brilliance of a team that finally believed in itself. After the game, while the rest of the team celebrated, Clarissa found Grayson alone outside near the bus. He was leaning against the side panel, sipping from a lukewarm bottle of water and staring at the stars like they owed him answers. She stood beside him, hands in her coat pockets. "You could have had a career in politics with speeches like that." He chuckled. "Only thing worse than bad basketball is dishonest promises." She hesitated, then said, "I saw Rick in the stands tonight." Grayson didn't flinch. "He's scouting." He looked annoyed. "Good," Grayson said. Means we're doing something right. Clarissa turned to face him. You're not just coaching them, you're healing something in yourself too, aren't you? Grayson looked at her. Hard, honest. I think I forgot who I was after Jason died. I didn't just lose a teammate, I lost the part of myself that believed I could protect people. Clarissa's voice softened. And now, I think I'm starting to remember, slowly, one timeout at a time. She didn't speak for a moment, then reached out and gently fixed the collar of his jacket. You know, she said Ruby told me something last night. Grayson raised an eyebrow. Do I want to know? She said. My dad doesn't coach basketball, he coaches belief, and sometimes that's harder to shoot. Grayson's throat tightened. She's 10. She's not supposed to be that profound yet. Clarissa smiled. Neither are you. And yet, the bus door creaked open and Halton called out, Grayson, you coming or should we leave your dramatic rear here for effect? Grayson stood upright. Duty calls. Clarissa didn't move, but just before he boarded she said, You're not done becoming who you are. He turned surprised. What do you mean? She held his gaze. You haven't even stepped on the court yet. Then she turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the glow of the parking lot lights, a man rebuilt from ashes, wondering just how much more he still had left to burn. The crowd inside Titan's arena was a machine of noise. Chants pulsed like thunder. Lights flashed with theatrical precision. Every movement from the home team sparked a roar. They weren't just fans, they were believers conditioned to expect dominance. And tonight, their gods wore blue and silver. Grayson stood on the edge of the court, eyes tracking the warm-up routines. He didn't blink, didn't speak, just observed every breath, measured every heartbeat, whispering numbers, angles, options. From behind, Halton stepped up. You've done everything you can, Ford. What happens next? It's in their hands. Grayson's reply was quiet. No, it's in their feet, their choices, their rhythm. We taught them how to breathe under fire. Now we see if they remember how. The buzzer sounded. The championship game had begun. First quarter. Wild Hawks ran Grayson's multi-layered strategy like clockwork. Not a sprint, but a trap. They let the Titans surge fast breaks, quick threes, just enough rope to stretch themselves thin. Meanwhile, the Hawks conserved energy, dragged out possessions, tested the Titans' patience. Clarissa watched from courtside. Ruby beside her clutching a small notepad covered in doodles and score tallies. Mom, she whispered. They're baiting them, right? Clarissa smiled. Yes, your dad's slowing the tempo, making them sweat under their own speed. Ruby leaned in. I think he's the coolest person in this building. Clarissa looked at Grayson across the court. I agree. Second quarter. The Titans adjusted. Rick Marston's playbook was all brute force pressures, traps, elbows that found ribs in blind spots. His voice rose over the crowd. Body them, take control. And slowly, the tide turned. The Titans began closing the gap. Tied game. Grayson signaled a shift. Collapse shell defense drawing the Titans into outside shots they couldn't hit consistently. Halton paced the sideline like a general watching pieces fall exactly where they should. But just before halftime, a Titan forward clipped Cameron's foot under the rim. No whistle. Cameron fell hard, limped off. Momentum shifted. Halftime score, Titans 43. Hawks 40. Inside the locker room, the team gathered with sweat-soaked brows and adrenaline still pounding. Grayson remained calm. This is exactly where we wanted them, he said. You hear their crowd. That's fear disguised as pride. Dylan, sitting on the bench breathing hard, muttered, Coach, they're getting dirtier. Grayson nodded, because they know we're smarter, and smart scares people who only know how to dominate. He paused, then stepped toward the whiteboard. They're going to come out swinging in the third. We run phantom fade. Stretch the corners, pull their center out of the lane. Dylan glanced up. You think he'll bite, he'll lunge, and when he does, you punish the gap. Grayson's voice dropped lower, softer now. This is our court. Not because we own it, but because we've earned every step on it. Third quarter. It was a slugfest. Points traded possession by possession. Each bucket answered. Each foul contested. The Hawks played like men possessed, not reckless but relentless. And yet, every time they clawed ahead, the Titans answered with brute muscle. Then came the moment. Dylan, flying for a rebound, was undercut mid-air by a Titan forward accidentally backing into his landing space. The thud of Dylan's body hitting the hardwood silenced everything. Grayson didn't wait for a whistle. He was already running. Dylan clutched his knee. Pain etched across his face. "I'm good," he grunted. "No, you're not," Grayson said, kneeling beside him. "Coach, don't pull me, it's the championship." But Grayson looked into the boy's eyes and saw the same panic he once saw in Jason's all those years ago. "I'm not losing you over a scoreboard," he whispered. Trainers rushed in. Halton crouched beside them, his face tight with concern. Clarissa rose from her seat, her fingers gripping Ruby's hand tighter than she realized. Back on the court, the ref turned toward the Hawks bench. "You need a sub, now." The rest of the team stood frozen. Grayson scanned the bench. Not one of them had Dylan's height, his vision, his timing. This wasn't just a gap in skill, it was a hole in the heart of their formation. Halton rose, slowly walked toward the equipment bag, reached into his coat pocket, and pulled out a folded contract. But Grayson didn't see it, not yet, because at this exact moment, this breath between silence and desperation, the game hung in limbo, and no one, not even Grayson, knew what would happen next. The air in the locker room was different now. Not quiet, not chaotic. It was heavy with unspoken questions, with the ticking clock of a game on pause, with the weight of hope and fear crashing together in the same breath. Grayson stood in the center, his back to the team. Dylan was gone, helped off the court ankle, wrapped in a swelling brace and heart heavier than bone. Clarissa stepped in. Her eyes locked on her father, who stood near the lockers holding a piece of paper folded neatly in thirds. Halton's voice was low, but it cut through the noise like a scalpel. "You signed it, Grayson." Grayson turned. "Signed what?" Halton unfolded the paper and held it up. It was yellowed at the edges, creased from months of quiet intent. "The contract," Halton said. "From the night we shared beers at Danny's. The one you barely looked at before signing." I signed on, as Coach Grayson said, already shaking his head. "You signed on as player." And Coach Halton corrected. "A conditional clause. Emergency eligibility." Grayson's jaw tightened. "You planned this." Halton didn't flinch. "I hoped for this. There's a difference." Clarissa stepped forward now, her voice trembling but firm. "We didn't know when, or if, but I knew if this moment ever came, no one else could carry this team like you." Grayson looked down, his breath shallow. "I can't." Ruby's voice cut through the room from the doorway, clear and innocent and impossibly brave. "Why not, Dad?" He turned, startled. "Ruby." She walked in, clutching a piece of crumpled paper in both hands. A drawing. Her newest. It showed Grayson in a Wild Hawks jersey number 11. Arms raised, a golden trophy in one hand, and Ruby standing beside him, her hand in his. She held it out without a word. Grayson took it with trembling fingers. "I promised your mom," he whispered. "I promised I'd never play again. Not after what happened. Not after I couldn't." He stopped himself. Ruby's voice didn't shake. "You promised her you'd be the best version of you, but Dad, maybe that version still plays. Maybe you just forgot." He stared at her. Clarissa's voice came from behind. "You didn't break your promise, Grayson. You buried it under guilt, and now? Maybe it's time to dig it out." He looked back down at the drawing. The colors weren't perfect. The proportions were off, but the love, it was real, and the eyes of the man in the drawing, they weren't afraid. Grayson looked up, eyes misted, voice hoarse. "If I do this..." Clarissa stepped closer. "Do it because you have something left to give, not something to prove." Halton added, "Do it for the team. For the kid in the stands who thinks second chances are only for the rich and famous. Do it because tonight might be their one miracle." Ruby held his hand. Do it because I'll be cheering so loud fear won't even hear itself think. Silence. Then Grayson took a long, shaky breath. I haven't laced up in 8 years. Clarissa whispered, then let's make every step count. Back on the court, the crowd stirred as the announcer picked up the mic. Substitution for Wild Hawks. Number 11, Grayson Ford. The arena didn't erupt. It froze. Rick Marston stood on the opposite sideline stunned. His arms crossed his jaw tight. The smirk he'd worn all night faded into uncertainty. Clarissa and Ruby stepped into the front row side by side. Ruby gripped her, drawing her eyes locked on her father. Grayson stepped onto the hardwood slowly. The jersey felt foreign on his skin, but right in his soul. The lights weren't blinding anymore. The noise wasn't suffocating. He could hear the bounce of the ball. He could feel the pulse of the wood beneath his soles. He could breathe again. A player tossed him the ball. He caught it, spun it once in his hand, then looked to his team as boys. They're going to come for me hard, he said. Let them. You run the lanes like we practiced. I'll pull gravity. Dylan, now seated on the bench with an ice pack on his ankle, grinned through clenched teeth. Go show them why they never should have doubted a janitor. Grayson winked. I'm not just a janitor tonight. He bounced the ball once. I'm unfinished business. From the sideline, Clarissa whispered to Ruby, watch closely now. Ruby nodded. Why? Clarissa smiled, her voice thick with emotion. Because this is the last time your dad will ever play. And maybe the first time he truly understands why. The scoreboard glared like a verdict carved in steel. Titans 78. Hawks 72. Time remaining 30.8 seconds. The championship crowd was deafening, a thunderstorm in a dome. Rick Marston paced the sideline like a wolf sensing blood. His players wore the smirk of kings who had never known exile. And across the court, standing just past the three-point line, was Grayson Ford jersey clinging to his back chest, rising in slow, even breaths. He didn't hear the crowd. He heard the silence underneath it. Clarissa gripped Ruby's hand tightly. Both of them standing now. Mom. Ruby whispered, Can he really do this? Clarissa didn't answer immediately. Then, with trembling certainty, she said, He's not playing to win anymore. He's playing to become whole again. Grayson dribbled once. Play starts now, he said. Cameron fake screen, clear the weak side. I want that 3, no hesitation. The ball was inbounded. Grayson caught it near the wing, spun away from a defender, planted his foot just behind the arc. The shot left his hand like it had been waiting years to fly. Swish. Titans 78. Hawks 75. 24.1 seconds left. The crowd dipped from roar to rumble. Press, Grayson barked. The Hawks surged forward, covering every Titan with suffocating speed. The Titans panicked, trying to reset. Their point guard fumbled under pressure, pivoted too hard, double dribble. The whistle shrieked. Turnover. Wild Hawks ball. Clarissa gasped, covering her mouth. Halton stood motionless, hands on hips, eyes wide with something between prayer and disbelief. 16.9 seconds left. Grayson called a timeout. The team huddled, panting, hearts banging like drums of war. We go full isolation, he said. Run me high post. If I draw double, Cameron cuts baseline. If they give me air. He looked them all in the eyes. I take the shot. No one questioned him. They just nodded. Inbound. Ball to Grayson. Clock ticking. The Titans swarmed 3 defenders, closing in. He pump-faked left, spun right, found daylight for a breath. He pulled up from 27 feet just inside NBA range. The ball arced like a whisper from the past. Swish. Titans 78, Hawks 78. 6.4 seconds remaining. Rick Marston screamed at his players. Inbound, get it across half. They rushed, flustered. The Hawks trapped near the sideline. And then it happened. A wild cross-court pass. Cameron leapt, stole it. Grayson waved frantically. Here Cameron passed it over the chaos. The ball floated slow, perfect. Grayson caught it just beyond half court. 4.2 seconds. He looked at the rim. 3 defenders lunged toward him, but the world slowed. And in that moment, Grayson remembered the late nights in empty gyms, the sound of a ball echoing in silence, Jason's voice whispering, "One more shot," Ruby's drawing in his locker, Clarissa's words, "Your unfinished business." He stepped back, planted, rose, and let go. The buzzer sounded. The ball hung in the air like a secret. Time paused. The crowd held its breath. Clarissa gripped Ruby's shoulders. "Look, sweetheart, this is your father." The ball kissed the backboard, hit the rim. Once, twice, then dropped. Bang! Pandemonium erupted. The Hawks bench exploded. Halton dropped his clipboard and buried his face in his hands. Rick Marston stood frozen like a statue sculpted from disbelief. Grayson didn't run, didn't scream. He stood at half court staring up at the scoreboard, Wild Hawks 81, Titans 78. The gym shook, but inside, Grayson. Only stillness. He looked to the crowd, found Ruby. She was crying, laughing, jumping, screaming. Clarissa beside her, eyes glassy, heart undone. Grayson placed a hand over his heart and pointed at them. Ruby pointed back, holding the drawing high in the air. The announcer's voice cracked as he shouted, "Grayson Ford with the buzzer beater of the century. The Wild Hawks are state champions." Cameras rushed. Reporters surged. But Grayson didn't look at any of them. He walked calmly toward his team. Arms open. They surrounded him, tackled him, lifted him. And above the chaos, Clarissa whispered into Ruby's ear, "That's what Grace looks like when it learns to run again." The locker room was thunderous, echoing with shouts, laughter, and the thump of fists against lockers. A championship had been won, but something bigger than a trophy was pulsing through the air belief, the kind that only comes when the impossible becomes history. But Grayson Ford stood just outside the Chaos jersey, untucked, sweat drying on his temples, gaze steady on the floor beneath his feet. In the distance, chants of "Ford." "Ford, Ford" rang through the hallway, but he didn't bask in it. He was remembering all the nights he promised himself he'd never return to this court, remembering Jason's still body, remembering the guilt that had become a second skin, and now, this, a win, but not just on the scoreboard. Behind him, Halton approached quietly, the echo of his steps barely audible over the celebration. "You did it," the old coach said. Grayson exhaled. "They did it." Halton chuckled. "Don't get humble on me now. Not after a 4-point swing in 30 seconds. There was a pause. Then Halton placed a hand on his shoulder. "I've coached 40 seasons. I've seen all kinds of endings. But tonight? This one?" Grayson looked up. Halton's voice softened. "Now I can rest." Grayson smiled faintly. "You retiring?" Halton nodded, eyes glistening. "I've been waiting to hand this team to someone worthy, and tonight proved I'm not crazy." Grayson didn't respond. Halton continued pulling an envelope from his coat pocket. "By the way, your phone's going to start ringing." Grayson raised an eyebrow. "This is from the Denver Falcons," Halton said. "Division II. They want to talk coaching contracts. Full-time, salary 6 figures, name on the door." Grayson didn't take the envelope, just looked at it. "They said what you pulled tonight was genius. They want that mind." Clarissa's voice cut in from behind. "And what about his heart?" Both men turned. Clarissa stepped into the room, her presence calm but commanding. Because what he gave tonight wasn't just a strategy, it was a resurrection. Halton smiled, nodded respectfully. "Then I'll leave the decision to him." He patted Grayson on the back and exited. Grayson looked at Clarissa. "You think I should go?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped closer. "I think you've spent so long proving you could be more than a janitor, more than a mistake, more than a man with a past." She took his hand. "That you forgot how valuable you are right here." Grayson swallowed. "You think this team needs me?" "No," she said, her voice unwavering. "I think we do." Silence stretched between them, heavy, honest. Clarissa's fingers gently brushed the calluses on his hand. "You told me once that unfinished business was the reason you stepped back on that court." He nodded. "Maybe now. Staying is how you finish what you started." Grayson looked at her, really looked, then whispered, "And what if I'm scared to choose the quiet life again?" Clarissa smiled. "Then let's be scared together." An hour later, Grayson found himself in the far corner of the gym, the crowd long gone, the floor quiet. He stood at the center circle spinning a ball slowly on his fingertips. Footsteps approached. "Ruby." She walked toward him, still in her game day hoodie, holding a marker in one hand. "What's that?" Grayson asked. Ruby held up the marker. "Permanent. Dangerous in your hands." She grinned and knelt down, uncapping it. Then on the court's edge she began to write something in big, uneven but determined letters. Grayson watched. When she stood up, he read it aloud. "This was the night my dad remembered who he was." His voice cracked at the end. Ruby hugged him from the side. "Are you going to leave us?" she asked, barely above a whisper. Grayson knelt down eye to eye with her. "I had the chance to go," he said. "Big one. Bigger than janitor paychecks and second-hand shoes." Ruby stared at him, and she asked. Grayson smiled, and I said no. Why, he kissed the top of her head. "Because I already have everything I ever chased. A team who believes, a daughter who's proud, and a woman who scares me in all the right ways." Ruby giggled. "You mean Mom 2.0? Grayson laughed, standing. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves." Behind them, Clarissa watched from the entrance, arms folded, a quiet knowing in her eyes. Ruby saw her. "You should tell her." Grayson raised an eyebrow. "Tell her what Ruby took his hand serious now, that your next jersey won't be numbered. It'll just be hers." Grayson blinked. That line was suspiciously poetic. Ruby winked. "I get it from Dad." Later that night, before the lights dimmed and the trophy was stored away, Grayson found Clarissa on the empty court, barefoot, twirling slowly with her eyes closed. He stepped up. "Careful," he said. "You're on sacred ground." Clarissa opened her eyes. "Then you'd better hold me steady." He did. No words, just her head on his shoulder, his hand on her back, and the promise of something not loud or dramatic, but real, but lasting, but home. A year passed like the final note of a long, beautiful song, fading but unforgettable. The Wild Hawks, once a footnote in the league's schedule, had become a phenomenon. ESPN ran a feature titled "The Janitor Who Redefined the Game." Colleges sent recruiters not to Titans, but to the Hawks' bleachers, and every Friday night the gym overflowed with more than fans. It was filled with believers. People who had witnessed what could happen when a man stopped running from his past and started building something new from it. At the center of it all stood Grayson Ford, no longer just a coach, not a player, not a janitor, but something better, a man who had found his place. Clarissa walked across the newly polished court with bare feet, clipboard in one hand, iced coffee in the other. Her heels sat forgotten at the scorer's table. She no longer dressed for power. She was the power. She paused at center court and turned to see Grayson helping a group of middle schoolers line up for shooting drills. He knelt next to one nervous boy, adjusted his elbow gently, and said, "You're not aiming at the hoop. You're aiming at who you'll be if you believe in this moment." The boy stared up at him wide-eyed. "Now shoot!" Swish! The kid lit up like a sunrise. Clarissa smiled. That was the thing about Grayson. He didn't just teach basketball. He taught presence. After practice, the court emptied, but Ruby remained. She sat crisscrossed at the edge of the sideline, coloring the cover of the team's new official calendar. On it, a sketch of Grayson, Clarissa, and herself, mid-laugh arms linked, framed by a scoreboard frozen at 81-78. Grayson approached and crouched beside her. "You make me too handsome," he teased. Ruby squinted. "That's just what love does to your face." He ruffled her hair. "And what does it do to yours?" She grinned. "Makes it brave." Clarissa stepped up behind them. "She's right, you know." Grayson looked up. About the drawing, Clarissa sat beside him on the hardwood. About what love does. They sat in silence a moment, watching the empty court stretch before them like a memory always waiting to be relived. That evening they held a small team ceremony. No microphones, no lights. Just families, players, and a few close friends gathered on the court where everything changed. Halton, now retired, stood with a cane and a cup of apple cider. "This court didn't become magic when we won," he said, voice hoarse but firm. "It became magic the day someone dared to believe again." He looked at Grayson, and then passed that belief to every player who touched this floor. The crowd clapped. Clarissa took the mic briefly, her voice calm and proud. "We didn't rebuild a basketball team. We rebuilt a family. And that family starts right here with one man, one promise, and one little girl who refused to let him forget who he was." She gestured to Ruby, who beamed and held up her calendar cover like it was a flag of victory. Grayson stepped forward. He didn't say much. Just, "Thank you for letting me come home to the place I didn't know I was missing." And then he stepped down and kissed Clarissa's hand, soft, slow, reverent. The gym clapped again, but this time it wasn't applause. It was gratitude. Later that night, the court was dark again, just like the first time Clarissa saw him polishing the ball under the flickering lights. Except now, he wasn't alone. Clarissa stood beside him. Ruby danced barefoot across the floor, spinning in slow circles and whispering stories to herself like every square of wood carried magic. Grayson held a ball under his arm. "You ever think he said that the game never owed us anything?" Clarissa nodded. "I think it just waited for you to stop punishing yourself long enough to accept what it wanted to give." He turned to her. "I never planned to fall in love on a basketball court." She smiled. "I never planned to hire a janitor who would teach me how to breathe again." He leaned in. Their kiss wasn't dramatic. It wasn't fireworks or crescendo. It was quiet, certain, like a full circle closing without fanfare, like two people finding a rhythm the world had once stolen and now finally returned. 1 week later, a photographer came to shoot the team calendar. Clarissa, Grayson, and Ruby stood center court. 3 basketballs, 3 different arcs, 3 perfect forms. Swish, swish, swish. The sound echoed through the gym like a promise kept, and as the shutter clicked, Ruby whispered, "This court gave me my dad back." Grayson looked down at her. "No," he said, gently, voice catching in his throat. "You gave me back to myself." The end, but really the beginning. And maybe that's all any of us are really searching for: a second chance, a court to stand on, and someone in the stands who believes we're still worth the shot. Now we'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching this from, and what moment from Grayson's journey moved you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. If stories like this lift your spirit, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss another tale of hope, love, and redemption. Thank you for spending your time with us. From our little corner of storytelling to yours. See you in the next story.